What up, YouTube Digital? This is a response to Lamb Dog's video, What Happened. I agree with that video 1,000,000,000%. But there's a couple key parts that I don't know if he didn't bring in or whatever else, that people really need to realize why the bailouts were so important. People had this big bullshit deal of, oh, let them fail. And, normally that happens. But when a bank is holding a shit ton of government holdings, the government was on hook for each one of those loans at 100%. So if the bank, let's just say Bank of America, is stumbling and they're going through a bad time, and they could have taken their own hit, the shit that they caused on their own, they could have taken that. It would have sucked. They would have probably, borrowed $1 billion or whatever. But they could have handled it. But with all the other shit, when the government, what people also don't know is the Fed. The Fed requires banks to buy up these government loans that have been sold. So the loans that the independent mortgage brokers were doing, which were the bulk of the loans, they get transferred to Fannie and Freddie. Then Fannie and Freddie turns around and sells these to the banks to administer, but the government's still on the hook for 100% of that loan. If it's a $200,000 loan and they sell it to a bank, the bank is going to do all the payments and everything else, but if it goes to shit, the government is on hook for the remainder of that balance, and they got to give it back to the bank. And that's where a lot of this shit happened, is because there were so many of these fucking loans. And you're talking averages of, in California, I think the average got up to close to $300,000. That's a lot of fucking money. If these banks failed in bankruptcy, the government would have had to take each and every one of these fucking loans back from them at 100%, which the banks would have probably been able to get up and leave bankruptcy court at that point. And then the government would have had to pay realtors and all this other bullshit to get these houses done, make sure they had the paperwork, put them back on the market, and whatever the difference is between what they loaned and what they sold for, we as the taxpayers are on hook for it. And if it's a $200,000 house that now is selling for $90,000, we're on the hook for $110,000 plus fees for each one of those houses. Now, the reason why the banks were important is the government doesn't know who to fucking turn to except for the banks. The banks know what to do in these situations. The government doesn't. They could have hired companies that would have done it for twice the amount that the banks would have done it for. So we would have been fucked even more. Those bailouts were happening. People don't realize those things were going to happen whether we liked it or not. They were happening. It wasn't the part of whether the bank is going to be there tomorrow or not. It was the government by law had to fucking deal with this shit. So we have to deal with this shit. It was a huge shit sandwich, and at the end of the day, people want to blame the Fed, they want to blame everything. Well, really, if you want to put blame, you can put blame on the Clinton administration for fucking doing this. Why isn't he in front of well, he pardoned himself out, so never mind. I know why now. But if you want to lay blame, every one of the people that you know that became an independent became a mortgage broker, became a real estate agent, became a home inspector, everyone that you know that refinanced their house 4 or 5 times during the fucking uptime, everybody in construction that now complains that there's no work, when they didn't get in construction until the late fucking 90s, very end of 90s, and they don't even know you know, how it was before the boom, when a lot of the construction people didn't even work year round. You know, my dad didn't start working year round until 98, somewhere in there. Now they did in Washington and stuff, but a lot of places they didn't. You know, most of the work dried up in the wintertime. Nobody wanted to work in rain and shit. But when the boom happened, everybody changed their mind. But after the boom, it's going back to how it was before. Now also, look at everybody on your street that bought Harleys. Harleys are a dime a dozen now. I can get a fucking nice Sportster for $3,000. And keep your eye out. May have a video soon. You know, you can get even Dynas. I've seen Dynas go for $4,500. Why? Because they're flooded. Why? Because everybody mortgaged their fucking house during this time and bought a Class A RV. They bought the toy hauler. You know, they can drive all the quads and shit in the back of it. They bought an $80,000, you know, Ford or Chevy or Dodge 350 with a fucking 10-inch lid, 37-inch tires on 22-inch rims, because God knows that's what you need off-road. And, you know, all this shit on the truck, the fucking tinted windows, the crew cab, all this fucking crap, it's gotta be diesel. God knows the fucking V8 or the Hemi or the fucking V10 or whatever can't do the job. Gotta have fucking diesel. You know, then they got all the Banks crap on it and everything else, and now they're fucking blowing those goddamn 10-gram motors left and right. I'd be hard pressed to buy a used diesel. Not because I know diesels ain't fucking badass. They are badass. The problem is the people that own them were not badass. So you got all this shit. You got all these quads and motorcycles and snowmobiles and hang gliders and boats. Jesus Christ, boats. Travel trailers and this and that and the other. People were buying. They were throwing their daughters $25,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 weddings. People were doing their own weddings at fucking $40,000, $50,000, $60,000. It was funny. My wife was doing photography, and you know, people at first when they would email her rates, because she used to advertise on Craigslist and stuff like that, and she had some pretty fucking basic rates, and they'd say, "Oh, you must suck because, you know, photographers cost $5,000." And my wife was doing, between my knowledge of shit and everything else and her graphics, we were putting out better product than most so-called pros with, you know, those guys had $5,000 cameras and she had a $300 camera. And she was putting out, you know, every one of the people that she did work for were extremely happy with everything. But that's how fucking foolish people got. People, you know, women in those fucking weddings could not even walk down the aisle. The dress was under $8,000. You buy a fucking car for... Oh, cars! Speaking of cars, God knows everybody had to have 2 cars, you know. God knows, you know, how many Mercedes were sold during that. I mean, we're going to a time in 2008, there was 17 million cars sold. Matter of fact, let's look at everything. People keep blaming GM and all this shit for bailouts, even though they took loans and paid them back. Here's something funny. Besides all the fucking fail bullshit on the blogs, but GM and Ford and Dodge got kicked in the nuts because overnight no one wanted trucks. I got my Dodge for pennies on a dollar. Literally, I bought it for $2,500 when it should have been worth at least $7-8 grand. And the reason I got it is I went straight to the Bay Area, where San Francisco and all that, and because I knew gas would be almost $5 a gallon there, and sure enough it was. Everybody was dumping trucks pennies. I was able to pick up my Dodge. I sold it for 4 years later, 4 years later, I sold it more than I bought it for, and I put only $500 into it the whole time I owned it. But no one wanted trucks anymore. No one didn't want to buy those $80,000 trucks because of gas. So people were like, oh, well, GM was selling shit that people would want to buy, then they wouldn't be on. Everybody wanted SUVs. Everybody wanted fucking trucks. You know, you go back and look at the car of the year as a truck. You know, Ford is trying to screw everything up so bad that they're using U-Haul numbers. What do they call the goddamn construction cab or whatever, the cab that they sell to the RV guys and the U-Haul and Ryder people and stuff. They were including those numbers in their truck of the year fucking figures to make them look even bigger. But yeah, that was funny enough. But you look at that, they were selling to what Americans bought. Okay? They wanted that, they made that. Okay? So, and people bashed them. Oh, they wouldn't need a bailout if they were building cars that people wanted. Okay, there. And sure enough, now they are back. GM is back selling almost as much as they did before. And stuff like that. Ford makes commercials that they didn't take a bailout, even though they did take a revolving credit line. They did take a whole bunch of tax credits at every plant, and they got major government intervention in some shit that I personally know about that saved them $1 billion. Yeah. But what is the number one vehicles again? Trucks. 17 million cars are going to be sold this year. We're back to 2008 levels. Trucks. People are talking about the Fed is the problem and everything else. No. You walk out to the middle of your street. Walk out your front door right now. Walk right out to the middle of the street. Look left. Look right. And there's the fucking problem. I don't remember the last time I saw a building like in San Francisco or whatever. You got a couple of those skyscrapers down there on Market. I never remember one of them, busting off of its foundation, chasing me down the street to fucking rob me. But I remember the motherfucker that robbed me at the goddamn gas pump. He wasn't a corporation. It was a local fucking smack addict. But hey, yeah. You know what? The longer people sit there and try to blame all this other bullshit and not realize that it's the people around them that are the ones that were the real problem. They were the problem to start, and they were the problem at the end. And now they're becoming the problem again. Nothing's going to change.